There is nothing wrong with your television set. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. I am in control of this transmission now, and I couldn't be happier. I mean, I feel like CP, except I'm not a... Hi everybody, I'm Drewski McGillicuddy, and I'm the guy that's been harassing Lee McCoy for the past 4 months because he's never seen Night of the Living Dead. I mean, how do you go through your entire adult life and you've never seen Night of the Living Dead? It just blows my mind. But Lee has rectified the situation. He actually went ahead and watched it first on VHS, and then he liked it so much he went ahead and watched it again on the Criterion Blu-ray. So, hopefully he liked it. There's only one way to find out, so buckle in. Get cozy in your seat. Get yourself a Monster Energy drink or a diet soda if that's what you're into. Maybe some popcorn. And get ready, because here's Lee McCoy's review of Night of the Living Dead!
Night of the Living Dead stars Dwayne Jones, Judith O'Dea, and is directed by the late George Romero. So a couple of firsts. This is my first Romero review, and this is the first time I've ever seen Night of the Living Dead. Get your dislikes ready. I know I deserve this. I've seen, like, I was looking at like the top 25 greatest horror films of all time, and you know, there's so many different lists out there, but I've seen probably like 95% of those, so cut me some freaking slack. But I've never seen Night of the Living Dead. I don't really have an excuse. I do love zombie films, so I don't know why this one slipped by me all this time. But I'm gonna give a quick shout out to Drewski McGillicuddy. Check out his channel. I'll post a card right here for his channel, but he's been giving me the biggest shit fest that I've ever seen for not seeing this movie. Deservedly so, good sir. I should have seen this movie. So, what I did was I watched the VHS, which is right back there. That's why this is a VHS review. And also, today I watched the Criterion release. And the transfer on this thing is freaking gorgeous. Let me just say that. So why did I watch it on VHS first? I don't know. I think I just wanted to experience it like I probably would have experienced it if I had seen it back when I was a kid. So yeah, I probably would have watched it on VHS. I would have watched it on VHS back then. So I wanted to experience it like I was a kid. And so I watched it on VHS last night. It was a glorious experience. Watched it on Jolene back here. And then I watched it today on the 4K restoration, the Criterion release. And wow, like I said, just gorgeous looking. So I'm looking forward to diving into this movie, and I'm glad I gave it 2 good viewings. I know I'm famous for my second viewings, but yeah, really looking forward to getting into this one. Now, first off, a quick plot synopsis for, I know I'm the only person on the planet that's never seen this movie, but just in case there's 2 of you out there that might not have seen it, it is literally like the first zombie film as we know it today. Now, I know if you dig deeper, you can find some quote-unquote zombie films before this movie, but every zombie film that came out today and in the last, 20 years, pretty much since this movie really, owes a massive debt to Night of the Living Dead. They really used that template, that formula, change the characters around, the story around a little bit, but you pretty much have Night of the Living Dead with every zombie movie you see. That's just the way it is. And, my favorite zombie movie is 28 Weeks Later. I know I didn't say Days Later, but forgive me, but I love Weeks Later that much. But even Weeks Later, some people say those are not zombies. I still say that 28 Weeks Later owes a huge debt to Night of the Living Dead. So it goes as far back as that. You could have one of those red stringed diagrams and trace everything back to Night of the Living Dead. The movie deserves that respect, if any, but it deserves a lot more than that. The opening of this movie, perhaps one of the most famous scenes from this movie, with the most famous line, "They're coming to get you, Barbara." It's a great scene, and so I see why everybody loves that scene so much. It starts off nice and cheery. This couple, they're going to place a wreath on a tombstone, and then they see this guy just walking up like a zombie, and Johnny makes a joke out of the whole thing, and that's where he utters the line, "They're coming to get you, Barbara." But the zombie's not joking. The zombie attacks Johnny and kills him. And so all of a sudden we go from a nice moment to an oh shit moment. And this is Barbara and Johnny's first introduction to the zombie, I guess, apocalypse. It's never said that it's an apocalypse, but there's this newscast that goes throughout the movie, and they're speculating on what's causing this whole thing. That's what's great about this movie, is like the world is figuring out what's going on as the viewer is. And I can imagine back in 1968 when this came out, when nobody knew of zombie movies like they are today. When they first watched this movie, they probably didn't even think about, why this was happening, what zombies were, and if they ate flesh. So I can imagine once that revelation came into fold into this movie, that they ate flesh, people in the theaters must have been like, oh, wow, cannibals, crazy. Because that's like the worst thing imaginable, that, normal people like you and me could die and then come back to life, and then we want to eat people. We want to eat people we love. We want to eat complete strangers. It's insanity. That's what being a zombie is. It's insanity. And so I think it was an irresistible premise, really. But Barbara ends up in this farmhouse with Ben, played by the late Dwayne Jones. We're going to dive into him as a character, as a person, in the review. But for most of the movie, they're all stuck in this farmhouse. And then the Coopers come along, Harry and his wife. You have these great character dynamics, these moments. And there's a growing theme throughout this that you can kind of see when you watch the characters, when you watch the newscasts. The big theme is togetherness, and how we have to fight together if we want to defeat this thing. But throughout this movie, nobody's on anybody's side. Everybody's fending for themselves. So ultimately everybody's selfish. So ultimately everybody's going to end up dead. Oh, and by the way, did I say this is going to be a spoiler review? Because I am the only person in the world that hasn't seen this movie up until now. So let's get into a little bit of the backstory behind Night of the Living Dead. Now, at the time, George Romero, he spent, I think it's $114,000 on this movie, and had no idea if he could get anybody to watch the thing. Literally threw the reels in the back of his truck after he finished editing, the day he finished editing, headed up to New York, and just begged theaters to show the thing. George Romero was a film student, but he wasn't savvy, I guess, with the industry, with the business side of things. And ultimately, he'd pay for that because he ended up losing the copyright to this movie because he wasn't business savvy, which is sad. But also, this movie came out literally a month before the MPAA was formed and we had a rating system. So this movie wasn't rated. And what I found interesting was, this movie was released just like a Saturday matinee. And so a lot of kids, they were actually going to see this movie. This is actually in Roger Ebert's review. Halfway through, they realized this is not like a family-friendly type of film. And so everybody's freaking out halfway through the movie. People are running out of the theater. And keep in mind, at this time, 1968, this was pretty much the scariest movie of its day, that involved cannibalism. That was, I guess, mainstream. I'm sure there are underground films back then that pushed the envelope. But, for this broad of an audience, this was some pretty crazy stuff to see, cannibalism on the big screen, as violent as it was. Now we're going to get into the characters, specifically Dwayne Jones, who was a black actor. Originally, George Romero wrote the part just for, an actor. It wasn't specified if he was going to be white, black, or whatever. And Dwayne Jones just happened to be the best actor. And he's a great actor. He does a fantastic job in this movie. But this was the first black actor to take on a leading role in a major film. And this movie came out literally around the same time that Martin Luther King was assassinated. So I can imagine the public reception of this movie, given that the main actor was a black actor. And Dwayne Jones himself probably had a lot of mixed emotions about this movie, especially during one of the scenes that they kept in where he punches a white woman. I'm sure back then that was some pretty racy shit. But, pushing all that stuff aside, just looking at this as a movie, I loved his character in this movie. As far as like a leading man goes, he was like the leader of this movie. You know, he was the one that really had his shit together. And he's the one that survives throughout the whole thing because he has his shit together. He has some great moments in this too, especially when he like beats the shit out of Mr. Cooper, because Mr. Cooper was an annoying douchebag through this whole thing. He was just like a coward. And Mr. Cooper's like constantly arguing with him that, you know, hey, my family's here. We're trying to save my family. And Ben tells him, I feel sorry for your daughter that you're her father. That was some pretty cold shit, but it was funny as hell. And then also you got Barbara, who is kind of the main female throughout the whole movie, even though she is pretty much just a basket case throughout the rest of the movie, as she would be after seeing her friend get killed, and then she's stuck in this house for the rest of the movie, and all this chaos is going on. She's with this complete stranger. So I think this is how this character would have acted throughout the whole thing, and I thought she did a great job, actually. This is the character that really has to pull her shit together, and some would say she probably doesn't. And there's a scene where she sees Johnny in zombie form near the end of the movie, and that just kind of like reopens the wounds for her, you know, even though the wounds are already open, it like opens them wider. Now, as far as the pacing of this movie goes, I think it's perfectly paced because it starts off pretty chaotic. As soon as the first zombie attack happens, which, by the way, the word zombie is never used in this film at all. They're called like flesh eaters, they're called monsters. But as soon as the first one happens, it's pretty much chaos for like the first 20 minutes. Then we have these nice character moments where Ben is getting to know Barbara, trying to keep her calm, just trying to maintain order throughout the whole thing. And then you have all these news broadcasts where really the world does not know what the hell's going on. They're like, you know, putting the breadcrumbs together as this thing unfolds. And then you have one of the most chaotic third acts I think I've ever seen in a zombie film. And this just happens to be the first of them. This is what makes this movie like phenomenal. That last act, first off, you have one of the greatest kills I've ever seen on screen with Mr. Cooper's daughter. You know, she gnaws off Mr. Cooper's arm. He deserved that shit. And then she ends up killing her mother with a trowel. And I've never seen a trowel murder on screen before. So that was pretty badass, actually. And that scene is scary as hell. Like, I can imagine what audiences must have been like seeing this in a dark theater and just with the music playing during that scene. It's probably one of the scariest on-screen deaths in cinematic history. I'll go ahead and say that. And I just saw this movie this weekend. That's how effective that kill was. And one note to make about you know, the broadcast that's going on. You got this other young couple that's in there, and they're really listening to the broadcast, you know. And because of the broadcast, which told them, you know, run, keep moving, find safety, as soon as they leave that house, they were dead. They went to this truck, and Ben, who's like the ultimate hero, goes out to try to protect them. But of course, they end up getting attacked, and then the truck gets caught on fire, and it's just mass chaos. Now, for a brief minute, I want to talk about the score, because I freaking love the score of this movie. And there's a couple different cues throughout the first opening of the movie. It really sets the tone of what this movie's going to be like. You know, it's very like eerie and somber. And it's just such a cool sounding piece. And then it turns into this like monster movie type of score. You know, a lot of those monster movies that we've seen from like the 40s and 50s. Hell, it reminded me of the Thing from Another Earth, the original Thing movie from the 50s. The score kind of reminded me of that, actually. But I love those old monster movie scores, and I think it fit perfectly with this one because really zombie movies are monster movies. Now, before we close this off and I give you a rating, just to talk about the legacy of Night of the Living Dead. Like I said earlier, every zombie movie owes a massive debt to this movie. And I mentioned Drewski McGillicuddy, Andrew Becker, earlier in the review. And his like passion for this movie really just made me want to watch it. I could tell that he wasn't trying to be a dick. He wanted me to see how much he loves this movie. I could tell. I don't know if it's his favorite movie, but if it is, I can see why, Andrew, because it's a phenomenal film. It really is. And I'm sure there's like millions of other people just like Andrew out there that just love this movie. As a matter of fact, when I posted on social media that I was doing this movie, there were quite a few people saying this was their favorite movie of all time. So, you know, I'm that way with Halloween. I can see why people are that way with this movie. It's so groundbreaking, but really, it's great. It's a really good movie, you know, all said and done. And one of the main reasons why I just love this movie to death, too, is because of the very last scene. After all is said and done, you got like this strike force. They're coming after all the walkers and they're killing them all. And then they get to the farmhouse and Ben is the last man standing and he's right there. And without even question, without even like asking if everything's okay, anybody alive in the house, they just shoot him. I think that is your ultimate message that you take away from this movie. That when the chips are down, we're screwed. We're pretty much screwed. Because that's what happened in this movie. They didn't care. Everybody was selfish. They were thinking of themselves. And so they didn't want to take any chances, so they just shot Ben without even question. Which is really sad and disgusting. And I love that ending, though. I think if you would have had a happy ending in this movie, then I don't think the message would have been as strong. So I'm really glad that George Romero stuck to his guns and gave us that really sad, somber ending. Because, you know, it was a gut punch. For Ben to die like that, after everything that he'd been through, was just so sad. And I didn't even mention the zombies in this movie, the way they looked. I actually liked the way they looked. Because there's very little makeup, and if you read behind the scenes, instead of making them look decayed, he kind of like took the most prominent features of whatever person that was and kind of boosted it to make it look unnatural. So that's why if you look at all the zombies, you'll only see a little bit of practical effects here and there. So in the end, guys, of course, this movie is a Trapped on an Island. It is a fantastic film. And I'm not just saying that because it's my first time seeing it. Please, if you haven't, get the Criterion edition, but also get it on VHS. It's like 2 different ways to watch the movie. But I can say that that freaking transfer on this was just gorgeous. Completely gorgeous. But then, if you watch it on VHS, it kind of muffles the effects a little bit, so they seem a little bit more realistic. So anyway, guys, that's it. What are your thoughts on Night of the Living Dead? Looking forward to hearing them. This is definitely one that's going to be watched this October, for sure. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day, and we remind me of movies that I have not seen. I need to let that go. Anyway, guys, follow me at Drumdums on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and now Stardust. If you like what I'm doing, hit that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and Drumdum out.